Without wasting much time, I welcome Michael Ortega to this AI Summit. Michael, pleasure to have you here. Michael, you're
And
mute. Yeah.
yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. So, Michael, can you walk us through your system practically so that our audience may see how it feels like? And this is one such system which you have developed at your place, which is in Mexico, I believe, and which have similar conditions as Jagdish also highlighted in his initial talk that India and New Mexico and all they do have certain similarities. Yes, please.
Okay, can you see my screen first of all?
Yes.
Okay, great. So everything I just heard from Jagdish is exactly 100%. Coaching the United States Gymnastics Federation many years back, one of our problems was how do we compete with the Eastern Bloc countries? So we came up with the methodology and idea of how to seek out talent. So after that happened, I moved off to the business world, and I've been in the business world. I came to Mexico about 4 years ago, and I found a real problem. I found athletes that were talented, but weren't in part of the system. So I said, well, how do I train them and still do other things? And I said, well, let's go back to what I've done in the past. So I built a system. The system is an NTG called Athletic Intelligence Platform. It's basically how do we bring all the pieces together so that we can make quick assessments and judgments on what the athlete needs to improve, whether he's in Toluca or whether he's down in Mexico City, no matter where they are. The reason why I use that approach is because I was used to training athletes at the Olympic Training Center. And in the Olympic Training Center in the United States, we had a way to communicate. So everybody came regional, nationally. Everybody had opportunity to get into the system. All they had to do was fulfill these satisfactions, these requirements. If they scored high, they get moved up the ladder until we get the national team or the national program. So with that in mind, I kept saying, okay, I have these athletes who are very talented. They're quick, they're fast, they're smart on the pitch. They really understand. So how do we use that so they can become successful? So I built this application. This application basically is a way to work with the kids the way they work. After I did this for 2 years, I basically did a white paper, and that white paper showed that my results were right. And it showed retention of the athletes from a high level of training. It showed that I was able to do mixed sport training to keep their interest. It actually showed when we went to tournaments, they were high performance in tournaments, no matter we were in league on MX or where we were. What we did is I had the athletes create, you can see on my screen, they would actually report their training session. Why is that important? I won't go through the exercise, but anyway, I made it specific to every sport. So every sport has what we call important points that sport needs to be, that's different than other sports. That's the technical part of it. The physical part of it, also, when you do a recording, it actually reports everything that the athlete is doing, what they've done, and then it actually gets a validation period. Why did I do the validation period? I really felt important not only that the parents understand what the kids were doing in training, I wanted the coaches to understand what they were doing so they could see and get metrics as well. So everybody can see where they are. So from here, we create the reports. If you see here's all the different sessions. You can see somebody's session right here. This was an approved session. In the approved session, you can see what they were doing, what they did for workout. So we have a longitudinal record as well as a current state record. Now, why is that important? That's important for retention of the athlete. It's important for the coach to understand and make judgment calls on what they need to do next, and also for the parent to understand where the child is in the system. So when you say my child is here, they could say, oh, I understand. So these notes, if you see here, this was done in Spanish. So my application takes this through AI. It translates this into what we call data that can be shared across all platforms. I mean, all sports. And so we can basically say this sport is like this sport is like this sport. But here we see this is the first part. So that's the translation part. So when they talk into the application, then from here, we pick up all our data. In our data, we say what happened. The coach, the reviewer says what they did, looking at the record, whether it was the coach or the parent. It says who reviewed it, comes in through, and it gives you a longitudinal record. Now, why would I want that? Well, from a coaching perspective, I want that so I can understand what the athlete is doing, especially if he's part of a national team. Because when we had our junior national program in the United States, and still today, 9 months they're training not on site, but they're still part of the national team. Their coaches give us reports, but I wanted to know more information. So the reality is I could actually see now through this system what they were doing. For example, my kids weren't always with me in my Casa Club. Sometimes they had to go home for 2 or 3 weeks. Well, they went home, told me their workouts, and I knew exactly what was coming back. So when they came, I had a good record. So the data is regulated in JSON, so I can export it, import it, and it's private. The timelines when it happens. We have something called a kite system. The kite system is basically if they're part of the PASA Club, they get a monetary value for education. Now we're logging education. Why is this important? Because I really think it's important that you got to have a full record of an athlete, whether an agent sees it, whether a university sees it, whoever's seeing it, so they can understand whether your athlete is doing that. Why would I want that? Retention. I'll be honest with you, retention. I want my athletes to be able to see that they have a reason what they're doing and how they're doing it. So this system goes through every part of an athlete's life cycle, and then we give it something we call a athlete market cap. Why would I do athlete market cap? Is it dollars? No, it's not actually. What it is the metric. So athletes, just like when they're playing video games, Free Fire or other games, they have something they already know. So now we have youth athletes who already know how to play video games, who actually are using a system that they understand. That's why we used XP. We gave them a system that they can perform, because really, who are the athletes that seem to do the best? The athletes who have a measurement, who follow a measurement, and who are motivated to be on the A list. So this is why I'm motivating them to be a part of the A list and see where they're going. I asked some of my athletes, what do you like best about the application? Well, we like the fact we talk into it and it gives us our workout. That's the first thing they said. So that's an A. Next thing they said is, I love going to my athlete market cap and see how I'm growing, because now they see where they started, where they ended. Once again, retention. Then they said, the funny thing is, I like the graph. I said, what do you mean you like the graph? These are uneducated children, who two of them who've never gone to school in their 15, 16. They've never gone to school, but now they said, I like the graph because I can see my progress. So they're motivated for the next training, for the next exercise, to get their parents to give them to approve their report. Now, all this is done through email. So for example, let me show you this real fast. You code it here. And what you do is you say, I want to share my session. This is an approved session. Let's go to a not approved session, and then I'll cut it off. But basically, we go to a non-approved. You come to here and you say send for approval. When you send for approval, you basically say, do I want it to go to a parent? Do I want it to a coach? Since I made this a federation model, my goal was, if I were to use this in gymnastics when I was part of the national coaching staff, how would I do this? Well, this is how I did it. So we basically say who you assign. So you can have a list of assignees. You can have whether it's a sponsor, whoever's tracking the athlete, because that's important for the athlete to know. That's important for the parent to know. And that's actually important for the sponsor to know how this is working, whether they're part of a CASA club or they're part of an individual program, or they're separated because they're part of the national team and are training with other teams. So basically, you put an email address, it sends an email, there's a workflow comes back. Once it does that, it gives you your XP that they get, because now they're motivated. And then at the end, it gives you all the other things. Now, there's a lot more to this app. We wanted to keep it down to 2 or 3 minutes, and I know I spoke more. But basically, this is what I built. I can't hear you.
Thanks, Michael, for walking us through this platform. Maybe we can have another day to talk only about this product. I love chatting about that part. And we will be having our podcast series where I'll invite you on that part, maybe some another day. But because of the time constraints, I have to move to my next question to you, and will request you to have a very brief one because we have already exceeded the time of the session. So, the challenge specific to the countries like India is there's a huge talent, and the pipeline of grassroots is very informal if you consider it that way. A coach in a small town, school ground with no cameras, no wearable. I mean, they barely can support their training part. So how does a platform like yours actually scale into an ecosystem like that? That's my, bigger question today. And if we are able to answer it, I think, we'll be able to solve a lot of problems in coming years together.
Well, I don't know about India. I haven't been in India in quite a few years. But I do know in Mexico here we have the same situations where we have very poor neighborhoods. But it's amazing how many people have phones. Okay, they have a device, and so they're playing Free Fire or other games on it. I designed the app the same way. So if somebody has no bandwidth, when you record, it saves it and stores it. And then when you actually get bandwidth, it uploads it. So it actually has a thread that's waiting, then it sends it up. So that way we get a communication. But basically, as I see this, if you have a kid, an athlete who happens to make a national training camp or gets part of a training camp program, or you have identified that has this, or they're part of a Casa Club that's funded, or they can use their devices to do the same things. They're going to have cell phones. Now, this is how I envision it would work in the future. And you could actually make this work so that the athletes, it can be reported by the coach as well, not or the parent. So it doesn't have to be done by the athlete. It can be done by somebody else. One of my athletes, very talented, and he doesn't have a phone. And even though I gave him a phone, he doesn't like using it. So we have a system in my system that actually does the recording for them as well.
Thank you, Michael, for answering that briefly. And yes, thank you, Jagdish and Michael, for joining us. They have given a great perspective. Basically, they have highlighted two sides of the same story. One from the top of the tech side, who is ready to, I mean, he's bringing a perspective that the tech companies are ready to power this AI shift. And the other one highlighted about how the grassroots can build the data which AI model needs with verified athlete records. So the answer to our initial question is there isn't a single company or a single platform that can address this issue. It's basically the infrastructure that is built deliberately to solve this problem in reality. That is India's reality or countries like India having that reality, not borrowed from someone else's place, because that will not solve the local problems that we have. So the question still remains, is India game ready? And I want all the participants to please put their answer right now, because your perceptions might change as we move across different sessions. But what is your perception right now? Please comment us so that we know you are attending and you are taking more interest into this discussions. Nevertheless, thank you, Michael.